Welcome to your Lot and Parcel podcast. You will find this program to have your best interest at heart. You can help us to continue this library of educational topics to help you preserve your home and family. As a nonprofit organization, we would appreciate your monetary support. Here is your host, Benjamin F. Diaz.
My guest is the creator of the Yass method for diagnosing and treating chronic pain. What is the key to the method that allows the correct tissue that is creating the pain to be identified? He will be speaking of that. My guest has been seen in different media platforms such as the Public Broadcasting Service, and he also authored the book, The Pain Cure, RX, and I think you will enjoy his company. Here he is, Dr. Mitchell Yass. Doctor, I want to thank you for coming on your Lot and Parcel show. What you have to say resonates with me, and I think it will resonate with my audience as well. But before we get into our discussion, please tell us your story and what led you to doing what you are doing today, Doctor.
So to understand the uniqueness of the method that I utilize, which is actually a method I developed, so it's outside of any curriculum, you kind of have to look to my entire life's experience and see how one thing seemed to grow on top of another. It starts with me being this very thin kid, the 99-pound weakling who had sand kicked in his face. As a result of that, that led me to have severe self-esteem issues. I really didn't like myself very much, so I came to the realization I'm going to have to change myself, and I realized I wanted to put muscle mass on. So from 19 to 26 years old, I tried to do everything Joe Weider and Arnold Schwarzenegger told me to do, and it just didn't work. And so at 26, I actually remembered I had taken a high school physics course, and I thought of weightlifting as pushing against gravity, and gravity is a force vector, so maybe there were laws of physics that could help me lift weights. And so I started looking at things like lever arms and fulcrums and force vectors and summation of forces and all these things. And over the next 4 years, I put on 40 pounds of muscle. I go from 160 pounds to 200 pounds. Just as I've come to developed this realization, I was a project manager in construction, didn't like it, didn't feel it was fulfilling. So I find out about this thing called physical therapy. Physical therapy comes, I enter school, you start with your educational component. Finally, you get to the point where you're going to actually treat people during your affiliations, and now someone's in front of you. And the crazy thing to me, the most obvious question when I was going to treat someone is, where is their pain? And someone would describe where their pain was, and it starts to become very clear to me that these people are coming in with diagnoses based on MRIs, such as herniated discs, arthritis, stenosis, meniscal tears, all these type things. But where they're pointing to they're having their pain is not the place it should be if that structural variation was to cause pain. So what that tells you is that that pain they're experiencing can't be from the identified structural variation. It's literally impossible, which now makes you begin to question the validity of the MRI. So being who I was at 32 years old and having a life experience and being taught analytical thinking as a child, I said, I think the right way to go with this is to interpret their symptoms. And lo and behold, what I find is that in more than 98% of cases, the cause of pain is muscular. It's muscular causes creating pain. And what people have to recognize is that muscular causes do not show up on MRIs or diagnostic testing. Well, since the primary mechanism for diagnosing is MRIs, this is the reason why all these people are being treated for all these structural variations and are not getting any results, any decrease in symptom or return of function. So from that point forward, over the last 30 years, I have basically worked to categorize the symptoms people experience with the types of causes that create them, and even if it's muscular causes, which particular muscles are responsible. And best of all, remember that lifetime of experience I taught myself weightlifting through physics? That is the mechanism I use to do the strengthening of the appropriate muscles to resolve their pain. And this allows me to get people better in a session or two session. People who have been in pain for 20, 30 years are better in just weeks. And that's been the process that I've developed and have been working to basically make it available to as many people as possible.
There you go. Very good. So we're talking about soft tissue then, instead of the actual structure of the body, or the skeletal part of the body, correct? If
That is exactly the point.
Yeah. So
yes. And the
that's
symptoms tell you that.
Yeah. So that's the basis of the method. You call it the Yass method, correct? Is that?
Yeah, it's my last name, Mitchell Yass. So it's
Yass,
just the Yass method, the
exactly.
method that I developed.
Well, that's very interesting, very innovative, very logic to me. It reminds me, Doctor, a few years ago, a good friend of mine, he was going to this one place to get readjusted because of his pain. And one day he comes out of that same place and he was worse. I mean, his pain was much, much worse. It was acute pain. Finally, the one that he was visiting, a chiropractor, incidentally, indicated, well, how about going to the gym and just strengthening a little bit? And you know what? That did the trick. And I think it goes along with what you're saying. To me, logically, muscle mass is what keeps you together.
Right. So just to give a little background and understanding of chronic pain, I think hopefully this makes people understand why or how I came to this understanding. So chronic pain has never existed in the history of mankind, whether you're talking the Romans, the Greeks, any other history period of mankind. There was never been chronic pain. Chronic pain began in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And has continued on and progressed, right? So if you're to understand chronic pain, you must understand its etiology. So what brought on chronic pain? Well, the answer was technology, the advancement of computers, automation, cell phones, laptops. All of this type of stuff led people to do jobs less manually, and the jobs then began to be controlled through automation or electronics or computers. And as a result, people simply started needing their muscles less. And this was not just 60, 70, or 80-year-olds. This is 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds. And so as a result of that, the less amount of muscle being used, the more susceptible it is for the muscle to weaken and shrink. When you then do require your muscle, you're more susceptible to straining. And that's what led to pain in this massive, massive growth of people who were now suffering with pain. It was no longer just the retired person. It was anyone who was even a teen, 20 or 30-year-old. That's how you account for the increase in the number of people suffering from pain, but that does not account for chronic pain. Why chronic pain? Well, you just described the phrase acute pain. What is acute pain? Acute pain is any pain that's sustained less than 3 to 6 months. Chronic pain is defined as any pain sustained greater than 3 to 6 months. So we now understand why the acute pain is coming. It is simply the fact that the output of muscle is less than the force requirement of activity, which is basically the sense of you have to push against gravity to do stuff. And if you don't have enough strength, your muscles are going to strain. Why did it become chronic? Is because the mechanism by which diagnostics were derived is now the MRI. MRIs can't identify muscular causes. If you can't identify the cause in it, which is in fact the tissue in distress, eliciting the symptom, then that tissue continues to be in distress and elicit the symptom. So the reason that acute pain became chronic pain, quite simply, is misdiagnosis.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. What you had said about this becoming more of we'll call it a pandemic, I guess, since the 80s and 90s. So what we're talking about is lifestyle, right?
Exactly. And so this is I say this a lot, and people oftentimes seem to get a little upset about me saying it, but it's pure fact. Chronic pain is not a medical issue. It's a cultural issue.
That's interesting. I hadn't never thought it, that way, but I agree with you. I agree with, a sedentary life. I mean, your muscles or your structure will, you'll experience atrophy.
Sure.
Then you can't do what function well.
Yep.
And my gosh, okay. Well, you talked about the MRI, so obviously that's not a good diagnosis, a method of diagnosis at all, then whatsoever, is it?
So it's definitely not. So let's try to understand a little bit about how this thing works and how it came about. First of all, nobody knows that the MRI was designed in the late 1970s not to identify the cause of pain. It was designed to identify tumors in the brain. That's why the MRI was created.
Well, that's a far cry.
Right? Now, it's $1 million a pop for the machines. And there's just not that many people who present as needing an MRI of their brain to find tumors. So I'm guessing somebody somehow said, you know what? We got to kind of pay for these things.
That's right.
Let's see if there's something else we could use it for. And without any attempt to do any scientific evaluation, they just said, okay, it finds herniated discs and stenosis. Okay, let's just use it for that purpose. And since there has been this massive influx of people now of all ages suffering from pain, well, this sounds like the perfect use. And it's simply implemented. There has never been any study to prove that it directly finds the cause of pain at that time.
That's interesting. So, yeah, I can see how that would happen. Well, let's diversify this machine here and use it for other things,
Sure. Yeah. So here's the next thing. So let's think about the theoretical premise by which this works. You have pain at your lower back, let's say. You then seek care. The practitioner says, we need to understand the cause of your pain, so we're going to ask you to get an MRI. The MRI then finds a herniated disc at the time of your pain for the first time, because there would have been no reason for you to get an MRI prior to having the pain. So a herniated disc is identified at the time of your pain, and because it is identified for the first time, it is asserted to be the cause of your pain. Do you agree that is the theoretical principle? Okay. That is called correlative thinking, correlative theory, or junk science.
Okay.
If I open my front door when the sun rises, I could say opening my front door causes the sun to rise. That is correlative theory.
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
So now I'm going to break the concept down so you can see why this is completely baseless in theory. Number one, the MRI would also show that you have 2 elbows at the time of your lower back pain, correct? You do have 2 elbows.
Yes.
Okay, so based on the same exact theory, having 2 elbows is the cause of your lower back pain. You need elbowectomies. You need to have your elbows removed.
Okay.
Right? Same exact theory. Now, let's take it the next step. And all I'm doing is providing you the understanding of the scientific model. This is the model by which all fact in this world has ever been confirmed. Fact is fact because the scientific model proves it to be fact. Fact is not fact when it proves to not be fact. So I'm showing you why it's not fact. Okay? So if a herniated disc causes pain is the hypothesis, then what is the null hypothesis, or the opposite? For one thing to be true, the opposite must also be true. So herniated disc cause pain. The null hypothesis is those people without pain should what? Have no herniated discs. You see how that works? It has both have to be true. 1994, the first study on people with no back pain shows 70% of the population who have no back pain have herniated discs.
Is that right?
That's right. 1994.
Okay. My goodness. Yeah.
Okay. So already, if anybody was really trying to do this through the true scientific model by 1994, the use of the MRI would have immediately been abolished because it has no validity in scientific fact. Okay. These are the facts. This is the way it works. Okay. So another thing that finalizes that understanding is that I'll give you an example, and this will hopefully make sense to you. So a person comes in and their pain is 3 inches to the left of their spine in their lower back. Okay. This is what their complaint is. And now they're going to seek care. And they get an MRI, and the MRI shows they have a compression fracture of the L4 vertebrae. And the person says, oh, You have a compression fracture of the L4 vertebrae at the time you're having pain, 3 inches to the left of your spine. Therefore, I will say that the compression fracture is the cause. And I'll show you the picture. I'll show it to you. You can see this, the fracture. So therefore, we're going to treat that fracture to address that pain 3 inches to the side. Now, anyone who accepts this is saying you're accepting correlative theory that since the compression fracture was found at the time, I'm going to say that's the cause. Now, let's try to look at symptoms. Where would you expect a compression fracture of the L4 vertebrae to create pain? I would hope anybody of logic would say at the fracture site in the L4 vertebrae.
Exactly.
But that's not 3 inches to the left of the spine, is it? I don't think so. I think I know my anatomy pretty well. Right?
That's good logic. Very good logic.
So therefore, understanding that principle is to say, I don't really care if you show me that vertebrae. It can't possibly be the cause of the pain.
Wow.
Now, who in this planet is willing to put themselves on the line and just use pure logic and scientific modeling versus being a part of this global system that says you will follow the MRI, you will not deviate, you must do what it says. Who's going to do that?
Right.
You got to be a little out there, a little crazy.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit of a visionary, a guy who's willing to say, I choose science over standardization. And that's what this is all about for me. You must understand that in more than 98% of cases, and I've been doing this for 30 years and treated thousands of people, those symptoms those people were experiencing were not where they were supposed to be based on that MRI.
Interesting. So let's say there's pain, regardless where it's at. Now, how do you determine the origin? By flexibility testing, or how do you do that?
So let's talk about, so now you're getting into good points here. So pain is a symptom. We acknowledge that. Pain is an indication of a tissue in distress. It's part of the body's feedback system. Yes. So let's say that it's muscle. Let's say that I'm right, that in fact, 3 inches off the spine there is a muscle called the quadratus lumborum. It's your lower back muscle. And in fact, that is what's causing your pain. So number one, we could start with, how does this sound for a concept? I'm going to press on where your pain is, and I'm going to see if I can bring on your pain. Doesn't that sound like a good concept to do?
Wonderful. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to press right there, and the person's going to go, oh my God, yep, that's my pain.
That's it. Yeah.
So what that is, that points out that pain is called point tender, meaning that the tissue I'm pressing on is in fact the tissue in distress eliciting the pain. So palpation or touching is a corroborating symptom to confirm that in fact, yes, that was pain from the low back muscle. So it's a muscular cause. Okay. Now, is posture based on muscular force? Is posture based on the pulls of muscles, or do your bones just arbitrarily decide this is where I feel like being, and they get to move and do whatever they want based on their own decisions? Or are muscles positioning based on the pulls of muscles? Bone position is based on the pulls of muscles, right? That should be logical.
Yes.
Right? So when the chiropractor is telling you, oh, you have forward shoulder posture, I'm just going to take your shoulder and push it back. So maybe for some period of time he could or she can magically push it back. But tonight, when the imbalance of the muscles that surround your shoulder have the chance to affect your shoulder, tomorrow your shoulder's still going to be forward. Right? Because that's the way the body works. Right. So if there is a weakness or imbalance of muscle, you could expect a corroborating alteration of posture. So in this particular case, I might find that the hip height on the side of the low back pain is much higher. So the pelvis is not level. It's actually higher on that side.
All right.
So now I've got palpation indicating it. Now I see an alteration in posture that would indicate that's the muscle. How about function? How about your ability to move, to bend, to twist? All related to muscle.
Yes.
So I might say, stand on your left foot and see how much balance you have. And then I might say, stand on your right foot and see how much balance. And I might say, oh my God, you see how hard it is for you to stand? You're very unstable on the right side. Well, alteration in function is the indication of muscular deficit. And what I might find is the muscle on the right side of the pelvis, which is called the gluteus medius, may have strained, and it's making it difficult for you to balance yourself. And that muscle on the left that's igniting your pain is actually compensating to help the muscle on the opposite side.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So what I noticed was a change in posture corroborates that that's the muscular cause.
So
then you could go on and do what you're talking about, muscle testing, flexibility testing, and between muscle testing, flexibility testing, postural testing, movement pattern testing, what were the other ones that we talked? Flexibility, posture, movement pattern, and palpation, all of those type things, I could then come to a narrative.
Right.
And that narrative would say that this particular muscle is breaking down, and as a result, it's causing another muscle to compensate, creating force it's not designed to, leading to it straining and eliciting pain. So that's the mechanism by which the Yass method works.
So at that point, what you would do is prescribe target strengthening, correct?
That is correct. Remember, I had that high school physics course of weightlifting that I developed, and that has allowed me to create isolated strength training exercises. So I can isolate the individual muscles that are weak, and I cause them to respond to greater and greater resistances, whether using resistance bands, whether using equipment, dumbbells, it doesn't really matter. But the goal is to get the force output of that muscle to eventually be greater than the force requirement of the activities. And then it's allowing you to function properly without symptom.
Okay, very good. So let me ask, Doctor, we're talking about soft tissue, the muscular structure, but how about the skeletal structure? Are there occasions where there is an issue there?
Yeah, so this is really good stuff here. Now, so beyond the herniated disc, the stenosis, and all the pinched nerves and all that stuff with the spine, the biggest development or the biggest area where surgery is being performed is on the hip and the knee, and it's associated with the magical bone-on-bone diagnosis.
Exactly.
Let's talk about bone-on-bone and what that means, okay? So every joint in the body is comprised of two joint surfaces that sit very close to one another. There is a space that's always maintained between those joint surfaces by either a meniscus or a labrum, which is just a puffy kind of form of cartilage that basically acts as a spacer. Okay. Now, why do you need that joint space? The reason is because when you're going to try to move your joint, these surfaces don't stay in one place. They kind of glide on one another. They move on one another. And that is required. That's called accessory motion. That is required for you to actively move the joint. So if you are in fact bone on bone, and take the words exactly as they sound, it is to say that there is no more joint space. And if there's no more joint space, you can't have gliding occurring. If you can't have gliding occurring, you must see a major loss of range of motion. Major loss of range of motion. And if I bring you to that end range and I try to push through it, it feels like a bone's hitting another bone. So that is the symptomatic presentation of being bone on bone. Is that part of the mechanism of getting the diagnosis of bone on bone in today's medical system? The answer is no. You take an X-ray or MRI. Correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yes,
So let's talk about this X-ray or MRI. It's an image. So it's not real. It's an image. And it's being interpreted by a person who maybe gets some benefit, let's just say, in confirming or trying to convince you that you're bone on bone. I don't know. They kind of get to do joint replacements for this purpose.
Yes.
But I want you to think of this from a scientific perspective. If I showed this individual an X-ray of someone who is in fact bone on bone, and the second x-ray that has a 32nd of an inch joint space, can the human eye differentiate 0 and a 32nd of an inch? The answer is no chance in hell.
No.
It's impossible,
Mm-hmm.
right? And all you need is a 32nd. You need virtually no joint space to allow that gliding to occur. You have to understand, it's all over designed. Evolution has figured out you're going to be on this earth for 80, 90 years generally. So it's built in enough joint cushioning to allow it to wear down over time and still function perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you have the space you have. But it works with even a 32nd of an inch. So if you know for sure that the individual who's interpreting that x-ray can't tell you the difference between being bone on bone or not bone on bone, how valid is that diagnosis via that x-ray or MRI?
Right.
It's not.
Yeah.
Right? But what if you came to Mitchell Yass? Well, I'm going to check your range of motion. And I've treated thousands of people scheduled for joint replacement, being told that they're bone on bone, and all but 2 had full range of motion of the joint, indicating that that was a baseless diagnosis. In fact, it was completely false.
My goodness.
And therefore, it could not be the cause of their pain.
You are listening to Your Lot and Parcel podcast. We invite you to tell a friend and to leave a rating and your commentary. We thank you in advance.
My guest is talking about a method that is completely different from the existing medical model of treating chronic pain. It is revolutionary, I must say, and his desire is to create worldwide acceptance of his method as the primary model for diagnosing and treating pain. For you to learn more of the Yass method to eliminate pain without surgery, you will find the link in the show notes. Let's get back with Dr. Mitchell Yass. Okay, so let me interject this question. Could that have been prevented, that cartilage loss, by means of strengthening your soft tissues?
So now you're getting to one of the great points that I want to bring up, which is that in this day and age, all you hear if you got pain is that you've got torn cartilage, torn meniscus, herniated disc, stenosis, meniscal tear, all this stuff, right?
Right.
But I guarantee you, if Mitchell Yass went for an MRI or an X-ray, remember, Mitchell Yass has put 60 pounds of muscle on and has done this through this perfect balancing of muscle, side to side, front to bottom, top to bottom, front to back. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if you check any of the vertebrae spaces, any of my joints, you're going to see they are perfect. They have maintained perfectly, even with the crazy amount of weight I do, even with the crazy activity I do, because if we look at the basis of the deterioration of these joints are designed, remember, one joint surface approximates the other, and they are designed to have 100% of their surface areas touching. So 100% of the surface area of the joint absorbs 100% of the force running through the joint. That's how it was designed to occur. But if you have weakness or imbalance of the muscle surrounding a joint, you will begin to see a misalignment of the joint surfaces because the muscle on either side is not pulling evenly. So that could lead to maybe 80% congruency of the joint surfaces, taking 100% of the forces running through the joint. That means that's a greater load than was evolutionarily designed. As a result, you will begin to see a wearing down of the joint surfaces.
Right.
At the end of the joint surface is a material called hyaline cartilage, which is white and hard. It's designed to absorb the forces. When you wear away hyaline cartilage, you expose bone. When bone is exposed, you either get deterioration of bone or hypertrophic bone growth. That is the osteoarthritis development. That's the mechanism.
Right.
So if you want to stop the mechanism from developing, or if you've begun it and want to stop it from continuing, you need to achieve strength and balance of muscle to return 100% to the congruency of the joint surface to where they were. And that is the way it's designed. You cannot have any continued wearing down. So in fact, your question is 100%. You could either prevent or stop these processes, whether it's in your peripheral joints or even your spine.
That is interesting to me. And it's all, I mean, fundamentally, what we're talking about is exercising.
Right. That's correct. So just remember, by the way, this whole pain thing, there was no such thing as chronic pain, right? Prior to the mid to late 1980s. So the answer is, well, why? So people, I'll always get attacked. I'm always attacked. Oh, well, nobody prior to this needed weightlifting. Everyone's telling me, oh, you could just get them back by doing body weight exercises. And I'm a big weightlifting person. I've treated people from 5 to 102 with weightlifting. So they say, well, why weightlifting? It was never needed before. And here's the catch. Muscle develops. Let's say you're a child, right? And you didn't do weightlifting. Your muscle develops due to your growth, and eventually you start walking and weight bearing and things like that, right? So activity requires a baseline amount of strength, right?
Correct.
As long as you continue to do the activities that can be accomplished at the amount of strength you have with the amount of muscle mass, then you're going to be fine. You're never going to have pain, muscular deficit pain, right? Because you're going to sustain your strength. And that's the way it was all the way up to the mid to late 1980s. That's why no one had pain. You had plumbers, you had electricians, you had carpenters. I always try to describe it this way. If there was a farmer and he had to sprinkle his crops, that woman had to travel the sprinkler system to look for breaks because there was no computers or anything. The woman had to be walking out there all this time, right? But now I assure you that the sprinkler system is all electronically controlled, and the guy's sitting there looking at his computer screen, looking for some red flag saying, oh, there's a break in the system.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So my answer to everybody who's having pain now, you got a choice. You could either do targeted strength training to sustain the strength of your muscles while you're sitting at your computer or doing a non-manual job, or switch your career and become an electrician, a plumber, be a farmer who has to go pick out the crops by hand, be a painter, do something like that.
Yeah, start moving. Yeah.
Right. And then you'll never have this problem again. Just like it was in the 1970s.
Yeah. I agree with you. Mitchell. I was going to ask you this question, but I think it'd be superfluous. I was going to ask you, can I possibly resolve my own pain? But obviously we can.
and that now you're talking about, to me, which is the most important thing I want people to understand about my method. Correct. It's full empowerment.
Yes, exactly.
That's the point of all this stuff, is that everybody over these past 40 years, there has been this coercion developed because you have to understand, if someone tells you that arthritis is the cause of your pain or stenosis is the cause of your pain, can you fix stenosis in your body, or can you fix arthritis in your body? No. They're basically saying you must now become imprisoned by our method for as long as you're willing to accept the premise that we're somehow going to be in control of your symptoms.
Exactly.
As soon as you say the cause is muscular, and this is my point to everybody I work with, I can't make you stronger. I can guide you. I can encourage you. I can help you understand how to do that, but only you can make yourself stronger.
Yeah.
So if you commit to that, you will, if you have a muscular deficit creating your symptoms, you on your own will be able to end your symptoms. And that's the power of the method.
It is very good, and otherwise, I mean, you're stuck with pharmaceuticals, I don't think you want to do that if there's an alternative.
Sure. And just remember, this is the point to understand. So here's what happened. They decided they were going to put all their eggs in the basket of the MRI. The MRI has clearly failed. How do you know that? Because there's 130 million Americans and 1 billion people worldwide suffering from chronic pain,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
This is all developed after the advent of the use of the MRI. There can't be any question this is a baseless method. So what happens is they try to use it, and they'll take you as far as you're willing to take you. Hey, man, I just treated a guy who had 7 back surgeries over 30 years. He was willing to keep going back. Never could fix his pain. 30 years. So they'll take you as, I mean, if you want to do 100 surgeries, and by the way, if you notice the verbiage is now, you tell me when you need surgery. You take the pain as long as you can, but when you can't take it and you think you need it, you tell me, and then I'll do the surgery for you.
Come to me. Yeah.
Right? So what they're doing is they're literally taking the moral responsibility of being in charge away from themselves and putting it on the poor innocent person with no educational background.
Yes.
That in itself has to be perceived as a problem.
It's a shame.
Right?
It really is a shame. Let me ask you this. This is, of course, your method. If you don't mind me asking you, has there been any research or studies to corroborate the premise?
Okay, so now let's talk about the biggest reason that the system will never work. And to put this in perspective, we've talked about the pain issue.
Right.
Globally, over 40 years, what number of people do you think have committed suicide because they couldn't take living in pain any longer? What do you think that number is?
I'd hate to,
It's in the millions, right? How many people have
entered
entered a level of depression they can't come out of? How many people have lost their marriages or relationship with children? How many people have lost their jobs because they couldn't live with their pain anymore and they couldn't function? So let's make this clear. Nobody's confused about the severity of this. This is not some casual thing. The medical establishment knows just how screwed up this is and how it's destroyed lives, right? But here's the little ditty as to why this will never change. And I'll give it to you in this understanding.
Right.
You decide you want a steak. You go to a 5-star restaurant and they come out and that thing is literally burnt to a crisp. Do you pay for that?
No.
That's right. You went to your mechanic, your car didn't start. You go back, he says it's fixed and the car doesn't start. Do you pay for that?
Of course not. That's
right. You have lower back pain. Guy tells you need a 5-level fusion for it. You come after it and your actual pain is increased. Do you pay for that? You're damn right you do.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
So what you have to understand is that the medical industry is the only industry that is fee for service. There is no connection between outcome and payment. With that understanding, and now you know I exist, but let's say you didn't know I existed. As far as you're concerned, there is a monopoly. Only one group of people that you could go to, that group of people that just can't seem to figure out how to resolve your pain. You are now left with basically 2 choices: continuing to go to them or making the decision to live with pain the rest of your life.
Right.
Okay? So when people ask, how come nobody is following the Yass? Why isn't there this great, you got it, you figured it out, you understand this. Why isn't everyone using this? Well, if I make a living and I get paid with you not getting better, why would I ever want you to get better?
That's a good point. That's a good point, Doctor. My God. Okay.
It's perverse, my man. It's really perverse because this is global.
It is.
I'm treating a lady in India now. I mean, this is some silly stuff.
Okay. Yeah. It's amazing. But I'm with you. I feel that a person as a patient should be in full control and not be bullied into anything that may become even worse. And you did write a book entitled "The Power of Pain." Overpower. Excuse me. How does it go? Overpower pain.
Overpower pain I've written 3. Overpower pain, the Pain Cure RX, and the Yass method for pain-free movement.
My gosh, you've been busy, Doctor. Okay.
I've done a PBS special as well.
Oh, how about
called
that?
The Pain Prescription.
There you go. And very good. So how would anyone, I'm sure in your books would outline the certain exercises or methodology of how to strengthen the body? I don't know how many components there are to keep yourself strong. I'm not sure. Any thoughts on that?
So the first book I wrote was Overpower Pain. That was based on the premise that you have to accept that the cause of your pain is muscular.
Yes.
And I went body area by body area and showed the most common cause of muscular pain and then described the exercises to perform. That was my first book. Then my second book, The Pain Cure RX, that took the primary areas, the neck, the mid-back, the low back, the gluteal region, the shoulder, the hip, and the knee, and said, I'm going to give you the understanding by using the techniques I use to diagnose, to establish all the possible muscular causes at those areas, and then provide you with the appropriate exercises. And then the Yass method for pain-free movement was an attempt to say, let's not talk about specific areas. Let's talk about specific functional limitations. So you can't drive. You can't sit at a computer. You can't reach and put your luggage up on the rack above you. What are the muscular deficits associated with specific dysfunctions? And again, show the exercises for that. So that's how you determine which particular book you would use. If, in fact, you found that none of these work, then you have the ability, which is the primary way people work with me, is you can actually do a Zoom session with me. Or if you're in the Jacksonville, Florida area, you could do an in-person session. And there, I actually help you through the diagnostic process to identify the pain. And then I present the exercises, and then you perform them under my supervision, and all of these sessions are videotaped. So you have that to assist you in doing it correctly.
Interesting. So basically, is where the body moves against resistance, I guess, is the type of exercise we're talking about, correct?
That's exactly right. Remember that the primary reason most people are having pain is based on an imbalance of two forces. Gravitational force pushing down on you, which is described as the force requirement of activity, right? That's how much force you need to do an activity, because every activity is being done against gravity. Then there's the force output of all the muscles required to do the activity. That's how well can they push up against gravity to allow you to do the activity. Usually symptoms arise because the force output of your muscles is less than the force requirement of your activity. And the only way to increase your force output is to make the muscle adapt to greater and greater resistances until the muscle grows and develops a greater or equivalent force output than the force requirement, and you do your activity pain-free and fully functional.
There you go. So in the context that we're talking about, pain is a good thing. It tells you what, that there's an issue, there's a problem, address it. So,
so what is the medical system doing in their little masking attempts? They're trying to give you epidural nerve blocks, cortisone shots, opioids, all these type of things, which is doing what? It's shutting down the emergency signaling system, feedback system of the body, which was designed exactly to identify when something's not working properly. They're trying to shut it down. That's insanity. You can't do that. That's craziness.
I agree with you. It doesn't make any sense. Here's a pill,
It's nuts. It's really, but then on their side, what else can they offer? They can't fix the cause. They can't identify the cause. They can't resolve the cause. So they have no alternative but move to the masking level. And that's kind of where we are now. It's just all varying types of masking mechanisms.
Wow. Interesting. Before I let you go, Doctor, would you share some words of encouragement for those that may be struggling or toiling with chronic pain?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say to you is you're seeking pain from somebody. You're 6 months to a year into your treatment. If you're not getting better by that point, and that person keeps saying, oh, it's just another few more months, you kind of want to start saying to yourself, this might not be the right thing for me.
Exactly.
Okay. The next thing I would say is, if you associate the initiation or heightening of your symptoms with an activity, wow, my back pain or my knee pain or my hip region pain increases when I stand or walk up a flight of stairs or kneel down, or my shoulder hurts if I reach for something, You've just associated your symptom with activity. The only tissue associated with activity is muscle. At that point, you have to, I don't care if everyone's telling you need a hip replacement. It's muscle. You have to go based on science, on evidence, not what everybody says. I always go back to this understanding. For 10,000 years, people threw rocks at the moon because they thought it was an evil spirit.
Yes.
Well, what did it turn out? It was just this rock evolving around the earth, right?
Right.
But for 10,000 years, they followed that premise, and guess what? It was wrong. So just because a lot of people say something for a long time doesn't make it right.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I want people to be empowered. These are the two big issues. Stop taking treatments just because someone says so, or you hope it's going to work. See if there's a theoretical basis for the treatment. Let the person explain to you, how do they know what tissue's in distress creating your symptom, and how will this treatment help resolve the distress of that tissue? If they can't do that and they're like, well, this is just what I do. You pay me $55.95, and if it works, great. If not, okay, well, you're just out $55.95. Well, that's not very scientific in my mind.
No, it's not. I agree with you.
But this is where people are left.
Well, yeah,
this is where people are left. And I'm out here just trying to say, let's just try to be a little bit smarter. Believe that maybe there is an alternative that is legitimate and proven to work, which is what I'm trying to present. And if this makes sense to you, at least, for God's sakes, email me. At least try to reach out and learn about the method.
Exactly.
And then if it makes sense to you, and only when it makes sense to you, should you try to seek it as the method for addressing your symptoms.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Well, we tend to, always, especially, I guess, if we're feeling pain, and I mean, we're always looking for somebody to give you the answer. You say, well, this hurts. All of a sudden, everybody's a doctor.
Yeah.
But no, I what you have to say does resonate with me, and I think it's a good deal for everyone that's listening to reach out to you if they need to take care of their pain. Doctor, how can my audience contact you for more information on this topic here?
So you could email me, and so if people Google me, if you look at me on the internet, it looks like I'm this very influential guy, and I've got my hand in 1,000 pots. That's all crap. It doesn't mean anything. Okay. I'm just a regular guy, and if you email me, I promise you I will respond back. So you could email me at drmitch@mitchellyass.com. You could go to my website, livewithoutpains.com. There's a contact us button if you want to reach me through there. If you decide that you want to schedule an appointment on that website, there's a schedule now button that allows you to make an in-person session at Jacksonville, Florida, or a Zoom session anywhere in the world. I would highly recommend going on YouTube or rumble.com and just Googling or searching for Dr. Mitchell Yass on YouTube. I have 270 videos, all free content about all areas of the body, different understandings of what pain is, and you can really start educating yourself. I think that's the best thing anyone can do. So that's what I would recommend.
There you go. Very good. I appreciate that. You were very informative, very energetic. I would think and imagine at the end of the day, they probably have to peel you off the ceiling there. You
know what the crazy thing was? I really did get to that point because over a period of time, I've treated hundreds of people this is when things really got crazy for me. Hundreds of people who were suicidal, who literally walked in the door and said, you're my last choice. If you don't fix this for me, I'm going to put a bullet in my head. And that was very sobering. And it really takes an intensity level up. And about 4 years, I found enlightenment. And what it did was it allowed me to detach myself as an individual from the entity that I've created and used to treat people. And so the beautiful point is at the end of the day, when I leave the facility, I'm just Mitchell Yass, and I'm able to be a very happy, easygoing guy. I look at hummingbirds and stare at plants and sing Kumbaya. So
there you go.
I hate to tell you, but with all that craziness, it led me to this finding. And so I'm the happiest I've ever been. And I think that's very important.
I can well understand that because what you're doing is very fulfilling. Helping people like that. I commend you for that. Yeah. Well, Dr. Yass, I want to thank you for coming on your Lot and Parcel show. And I'll tell you what, I wish you the very best, Doctor.
Thank you for having me. And I always appreciate the opportunity to spread the word and hopefully get some people to see there's an answer. And tomorrow could be a day without pain and a life that you justly deserve. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. The theme music has been provided by Echo Foxtone. All the opinions expressed in the podcast are opinions only and should not be relied on. For more information, please visit yourlotandparcel.org. We trust you will sponsor our informative podcast with your generosity. For more information, please visit yourlotandparcel.org.